having revisited Durkheim's foundational social theory, we now turn our attention to a critical question. Does his work on solidarity still hold water in today's complex democratic landscapes? We're talking about societies buzzing with pluralism, grappling with multiculturalism, and increasingly interconnected through globalization. The challenge isn't to defend Durkheim's legacy, but to see if his insights can help us build more robust, just, and inclusive democracies right now. Think about Durkheim's background, a French Jew deeply embedded in a tight-knit community, yet simultaneously navigating the broader, often clashing, values of the Third Republic: liberty, equality, and solidarity. It wasn't just a backdrop, it was the crucible. Every major topic he tackled, from the seemingly exotic totemism of Australian Aborigines to the intricacies of modern knowledge, became a lens for examining this central theme: solidarity. Take elementary forms. He wasn't just fascinated by totems, he saw them as a gateway to understanding something fundamental about humanity, our inherent need and capacity to connect socially. Or consider his sociology of knowledge. By arguing that reason isn't some floating, timeless thing but is shaped by collective representations, he wasn't just describing how we think, he was making a normative point, challenging the idea that individuals are isolated atoms. Even his study of modern individualism wasn't about celebrating lone wolves, it was about finding a specific kind of individualism rooted in social bonds. This leads us to Durkheim's fascinating concept of moral individualism. Forget the rugged individualism that prioritizes self-interest above all else. This is different. Moral individualism for Durkheim is this dynamic system. Think of it almost like a religion of the modern age. It's got its sacred symbols like the Bill of Rights, its rituals celebrating heroes who defend rights and punishing those who trample them. It's the shared moral fabric that says, "We the people." It's the answer to the big question of his time. In a diverse democracy, what holds us together? What provides a basis for a common good? For Durkheim, it wasn't about ignoring differences or enforcing conformity, but about recognizing this powerful, albeit sometimes contested, form of solidarity built around the dignity and rights of every individual. Now, fast forward to today. Is solidarity still relevant? Well, it's definitely under scrutiny. People are skeptical. On one hand, epistemologically, can we really find a universal human nature to base common ground on when we're so diverse? When solidarity does appear, is it genuine connection, or just a forced uniformity, a kind of cultural imperialism where the powerful impose their norms on the powerless? Think about the cultural wars debates in the US. They've certainly highlighted how solidarity can be weaponized, used insidiously. But here's the twist. Wrestling with these differences, trying to respect otherness, paradoxically forces us to ask again what we share. Who is this we in the first place? And guess what? As the language of human rights spreads globally, we see activists talking about global solidarity tackling issues like torture or hunger. So yes, solidarity is contested, maybe even dangerous if misused, but pretending it doesn't matter? That's self-deception. It's a powerful idea whether we like it or not. Here's a crucial historical detour. When Durkheim championed solidarity, he was speaking to his fellow intellectuals, socialists, progressives in France. His vision was radical: solidarity for all citizens, but based on very specific progressive goals, protecting human rights, an economy serving welfare, not just profit, freedom of thought, a secular state. But here's the irony: after his death, his work got co-opted. Conservative thinkers, nostalgic for a mythical past of simple communities and uniformity, grabbed onto Durkheim's name and twisted it. They used his ideas about social order and solidarity to argue for control, for order, for less change. This conservative label stuck, and it's still misleading. It completely misses the point. Durkheim wasn't just describing social structures, he was investigating them to fight for social justice. People say, Durkheim focused on the present, so he must be conservative, stuck in the status quo. Wrong. His deep dive into history wasn't about stagnation, it was about seeing how things could change, how diversity could fuel progress, and how easily hard-won rights could be lost. For Durkheim, the rights and dignity of the individual weren't some eternal truth handed down from on high. They were achievements, fragile ones, constantly under threat, requiring constant moral effort and social solidarity to protect and improve. Moral progress, he believed, demands a solidarity willing to confront problems and push for change. Human rights aren't just written in laws. They need to be lived, breathed, supported by shared beliefs and practices within society. And this spirit of dynamic democratic solidarity? It's not dead. Thinkers and activists today, like Nader, West Richards, they're carrying this torch. They encourage everyone to find their voice to contribute to ongoing public conversations. They recognize that despite our differences, we share a history, a future. Take the history of slavery in America. It's not just a black issue, it's an American issue, shaping us all. The hope is that, driven by shared experiences, shared ideals, and even shared grief, we can create a public where diversity is honored and commonality is discovered. This doesn't need some mystical universal morality. It can spring from the simple, powerful hope that as creatures bound by fate and necessity, we can cooperate to build something better together. So, let's tackle a common myth that multiculturalism or pluralism automatically means solidarity is irrelevant or inappropriate. Think about the three pillars of a democratic republic: liberty, equality, and solidarity. Can we really drop the last one? Can we effectively pursue liberty and equality, which demand serious social resolve, collective wisdom, and financial commitment, without a strong sense of shared purpose? John Dewey, Martin Luther King Jr., and yes, Durkheim, they'd all argue that as diversity increases and the need for justice grows, the need for a robust, appropriate form of solidarity becomes even more critical. That assumed tension between diversity and solidarity, it needs closer examination. What exactly is solidarity? Durkheim basically said it's unavoidable. If nothing weird happens, societies naturally develop some form of solidarity. Now, this doesn't tell us if it's thick or thin, inclusive or exclusive, strong or fragile. But it's a crucial reminder: we already have some kind of solidarity. To deny that is like denying that hierarchies exist in liberal democracies. It's being absent-minded, accepting an illusion. And why does overlooking what's actually there matter? Because that's how individuals and societies stumble, how we fail to navigate the world effectively. Look around. We live in a society full of different people and groups, yes, but we're also deeply interdependent. We share legal rights, moral obligations. We share a common history, even if our personal timelines landed us here at different points, and that history shapes our common future. Geographically, we belong to a defined territory. Symbolically, we share powerful icons, flags, foundational documents, figures like MLK or Lincoln memorials. There's a shared creed emphasizing individual rights and also the rights and protection of the nation on the world stage. Durkheim pointed out that even the military, tasked with national defense, implies a national collectivity worth defending. That's why we get morally outraged when the military is used for illegitimate political goals, unlike its use in World War II or Bosnia for security. These are signs of a national solidarity, even if we don't always talk about it academically. When Durkheim wrote, "We do not belong to ourselves entirely," he was reminding us of all the background stuff, the shared beliefs, symbols, practices that make up our institutions and daily lives. Sure, we seem to pursue many things individually, but almost everything relies on an invisible web of interdependencies. So, the question isn't should we have solidarity? That's like asking, should we have gravity? The real question is, what kind of solidarity do we already have, and what kind should we strive for? It's about understanding and potentially improving what's already there. My own take: an appropriate solidarity for today's democracies needs to go beyond just tolerating diversity in private life. It has to actively celebrate diversity as a public good, a resource. Think about the United States. I believe the country won't truly understand itself until it embraces and celebrates its rich pluralism. Our identity isn't found in erasing differences, but at the intersection of them. Finding who we are as a people happens there. While we can empirically study existing solidarity, normatively, it still needs to be achieved. And that achievement, I think, happens precisely at those plural crossroads, where we affirm our own identities, while also risking them for the sake of a deeper sense of belonging to a shared whole. Let's revisit moral individualism, especially in contrast to critics like Ferdinand Brunetière. Tocqueville noted the novelty of individualism compared to egoism. But even then, thinkers like Montaigne or Rousseau celebrated individuality. Then came Brunetière, a Catholic critic, decrying individualism as a sickness, weakening France's moral core and solidarity, especially among intellectuals. He warned it would lead to relativism and hedonism. Enter Durkheim, responding directly in his famous essay, Individualism and the Intellectuals. He tackled the recurring argument that liberalism inevitably leads to moral chaos. Yes, he conceded, some forms of liberalism are selfish, consumerist, bad for the common good. But there's another strand, the moral and social strand of liberalism, which is precisely moral individualism. And this, Durkheim argued, is the key. Durkheim's defense was stunning. Not only is moral individualism not anarchical, he declared, It's the only system that can ensure moral unity in liberal democracies like France. How did he argue this? He didn't appeal to some abstract universal reason. Instead, he rooted his defense firmly in French history, the Revolution, the Constitution. He argued that France's modern moral traditions were built on these liberal, pluralistic institutions and values protecting individual rights. To abandon them, he warned, is to invite moral chaos. Ironically, it was the conservative Brunetière, calling for solidarity above all, whom Durkheim saw as the real threat to the moral fabric. This was a distinctly French argument, written for the French by a Frenchman, positioning liberal values within a republican tradition focused on public duties. So, what makes up this moral individualism? Think of it in two parts. First, there's a pervasive set of shared beliefs and practices that uphold individual rights and dignity. This idea was hinted at in Suicide and later developed in his response to Brunetière. Second, there's a plurality of social spheres, family, work, civic groups, each allowing diversity and autonomy, providing individuals with different moral communities and identities. This idea was explored in the division of labor and elaborated later. You'd need both for a strong defense of democratic liberalism. Component 1 ensures that despite diversity, people care about the common political community, partly because they believe in individual worth. Component 2 ensures that as people pursue their rights within various spheres, they find meaning and identity there, contributing to a moral pluralism. Let's clarify Durkheim's moral pluralism. It's about the relationship between the political community and all of those other groups, churches, ethnic organizations, activist groups, etc. It doesn't mean everyone has to agree on everything. Social solidarity doesn't require so homogeneity. However, on some fundamental issues like protecting diversity itself, widespread agreement is desirable. Think of Durkheim's model as rejecting three extremes: 1. Society as just random individuals; 2. Society as separate, self-sufficient groups cut off from the larger political realm; 3. Society as a single, monolithic, homogeneous nation. Durkheim's vision combines the best of all worlds. It supports diverse communities, like Model 2 shares limited common goals, like Model 3, and respects individual and group rights, like Model 1. Durkheim aligns with communitarians on the value of association for well-being, but also with liberals on the fact that no single community, including the state, has a monopoly on virtue. Happiness and an ethical life can be found in many different groups. Yet his moral pluralism still supports a shared political community. This community aims to be inclusive, open to critical reflection. Sometimes the most important agreement is simply agreeing that we need to debate tough issues: economic justice, the environment, security, peace. This potential agreement rests on shared history and future and caring about problems that affect everyone. Crucially, no secondary group should block its members from participating in this broader civic life. One of Durkheim's most insightful applications of this thinking is his work on moral education. It beautifully connects critical thought with shared traditions, autonomy with community, diversity with solidarity. His goal? To use society's shared understanding to cultivate students' critical thinking skills. Why? Because critics, facing new challenges, always draw on their inherited culture to innovate or critique. Durkheim stressed that future citizens need exposure to ideas beyond their own immediate circle. They need to get comfortable with the unfamiliar to truly appreciate otherness, to see the stranger as a fellow human. History and literature are key here. History teaches complexity, critical perspective. Literature offers vivid, detailed glimpses into other lives, letting students touch the manners, ideas, and institutions of others with their own hands. Moral education, then, happens at the intersection of the familiar and the unfamiliar, the past and the present. Schools should equip students to evaluate current practices by considering alternatives from other cultures, new developments, and enduring ideals yet to be fully realized. And the state has a vital role here. It can't let the majority impose its views on minorities, but neither can it leave education entirely to private whim. Since education is crucial for the common life, the state must ensure it's accessible to all and prevent it from being dominated by any single group. Of course, the big question arises: what shared understanding are we talking about? Whose version? Durkheim knew there were no easy answers. These are issues for continuous debate in a democracy. The state doesn't create this shared community of ideas. It's constantly made and remade through countless social interactions. This brings us back to Durkheim's epistemology. Genuine disagreement and criticism require some shared vocabulary. Think of the Dreyfusards during the affair. Their dissent wasn't just random noise. It was articulated using the shared moral language of their time, talk of human rights, dignity, collective aspirations. Participating in such public discourse is necessary for meaningful dissent. Durkheim genuinely believed there was common ground, a tacit solidarity regarding fundamental ideals, even if interpretations varied. Solidarity for him was both a fragile reality and a hopeful possibility, promising progress towards a better moral identity. Was this identity contested? Absolutely. But that didn't stop him from advocating for a solidarity that supported just, reformist institutions. Remember the Dreyfus Affair of 1898? France was confronting otherness head-on. Durkheim argued then that the very diversity and individualism that seemed problematic were actually integral parts of France's moral character and social solidarity. Today, the situation is flipped. Individualism and diversity aren't on trial, solidarity is. But Durkheim's argument cuts both ways. It defends both diversity and solidarity, showing they don't have to be enemies. In fact, they can reinforce each other. Durkheim's concern about solidarity was deeply tied to his worries about the economy. He saw a dangerous trend, an economy obsessed with profit maximization detached from human welfare. His work on professional ethics stemmed from the belief that economic life should answer to society's civic needs. As societies became more individualistic, he feared, the shared moral compass guiding economic activity was weakening. His solution? Extend democratic practices into the economic sphere, bringing moral influence back in. This fits perfectly with his view that the economy isn't some separate emerald zone, but a vital part of public life. Classical economists missed this, seeing economic functions as ends in themselves, not means to a harmonious social community. Worse, Durkheim warned, the immoral ethos of egoism in the economy threatened to spread to other parts of society, a public danger. How did Durkheim explain this moral vacuum in the economy? He saw how economic life expanded dramatically over centuries, shedding old regulators like guilds and monarchs, supposedly replaced by the spontaneous market. But Durkheim saw this as no real regulation at all. He asked, is this normal? Can a just economic system arise purely from material forces? No, he insisted, it's a moral task. Why? Because justice doesn't just happen automatically through supply and demand. It requires conscious effort, planning, and shared purpose. His solution? Create occupational groups, associations of workers in specific trades. These groups would act as democratic spaces between the individual worker and the large state or corporation. They'd bring moral principles into the workplace, giving workers a voice, and making the economy accountable to the wider political community. It wasn't socialism but a warning against letting the economy run wild. Beyond the economy, what about the state itself? Durkheim distinguished between the state agents of authority and the political community, the shared public sphere encompassing all groups. Crucial, the state depends on the existence of these secondary groups. Without them, legitimate political authority dissolves. He envisioned a state model that wasn't laissez-faire nor nationalistic, but one that genuinely represented democratic ideals, supporting both moral individualism and pluralism. How? By acting as a check against collective tyranny, preventing groups from absorbing individuals, like family or corporate tyranny. The state reminds groups they're part of a larger whole, upholding laws that protect minorities, rescuing children from patriarchal domination, workers from corporate power. It's an active guardian of moral pluralism. Conflict between the state and secondary groups is inevitable, Durkheim provocatively claimed, and it's from this tension that individual liberties emerge. But it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. The health of both depends on the other. Without diverse groups mediating between the state and the individual, the state becomes either too distant or too controlling. Without the state's moral authority, groups might descend into chaos or tyranny. It's a dialectical relationship. From this dynamic interplay emerges the solidarity of the political community, which in turn sustains the dialectic. Solidarity isn't imposed from above or spontaneously harmonious. It arises from and reinforces this state-group dynamic. Unlike Rousseau, who distrusted groups, Durkheim championed their role in providing diverse moral homes and dynamism. This leads to Durkheim's vision of a democratic political community, one that fosters free, open debate capable of driving radical change. Radical because such debate allows us to probe uncomfortable customs and hidden prejudices. But this requires a shared public space. The political community's job is to create the conditions for learning from each other across our differences. Without this dialogue, the state becomes unchecked, its authority questionable. Local conversations matter too, as long as they engage with national issues. The more democratic a society, the more deliberation and critical spirit should shape public affairs. This isn't just about tolerating dissent. It's about creating conditions where vigorous dissent can teach the community. Solidarity here means active participation in this process of debate and reform, not mere conformity. What about the global stage? Durkheim acknowledged an international sphere, noting nations are accountable, not just domestically but internationally. He saw the rise of what could be called global ethics. One basis is recognizing duties that apply universally, protecting individuals from harm regardless of borders. Another socio-historical account links this to increasing diversity. As nations become more diverse internally, the sacred value shifts from the nation itself to the individual human being. Nations increasingly justify their existence by protecting individuals from suffering. Given the immense diversity globally, the only thin common ground is a commitment to basic human rights. Durkheim predicted this global ethic would grow stronger as nations cooperate on common problems, eventually placing human aims above purely national ones. But Durkheim wasn't naive about globalization, especially the economic kind. He worried that applying laissez-faire logic globally wouldn't solve economic justice. It might just spread anomic chaos. Think about today's economic globalization, deregulation, privatization, free flow of capital. Add the information revolution connecting everything instantly. Sounds great, right? Well, Durkheim would caution us. Some third-way politics embraces this globalization, claiming to avoid both old-style liberalism and socialism. But often, it ends up granting immense power to transnational corporations. Think egoistic corporatism, disassembling regulations, much like laissez-faire. These corporations wield vast, unaccountable power, posing serious threats to democracy, local communities, and the environment, driving unsustainable growth and linking corporate wealth with global poverty. Can Durkheim offer guidance here? His proposal for occupational groups fostering moral reasoning locally could indeed apply globally. The premise is sound. Encourage participatory democracy that directly shapes the economic realm, wherever it operates. This means transferring power from distant corporate boards to local workers and communities affected by global operations. We need a modified dialectic, including the international sphere. Progressive nations should foster an order balancing local, civic, and global levels, with special emphasis on strengthening local communities where democracy feels real. At the same time, local and national actors must engage with international institutions and forces. Global justice requires just states, and just states require sufficient solidarity working towards common aims locally, nationally, and globally. The Durkheimian lesson is clear. Whether dealing with civic or global diversity, achieving justice demands commitment to some form of solidarity. Neglect it, and even our cherished ideals lose their power. This brings us to Giles Gunn's intriguing book, Beyond Solidarity. Initially, I thought Gunn meant we should ditch solidarity altogether in our globalized age. But no, his argument is the opposite. To achieve solidarity now, we must embrace difference and otherness, not seek sameness. He calls for a pragmatism of otherness. What does this mean? It means acknowledging difference, yes, but also finding a fundamental humanity beneath or amidst it. It involves looking at how people, even in terrible circumstances, find kinship with others despite differences, recognizing the ethical claim of the other, resisting the urge to see everyone through our own lens, and moving beyond the hope of consensus to the need for comedy mutual respect. Can a Durkheimian support this? Can understanding truly require risking our own beliefs to encounter the truly different? Durkheim didn't use the language of otherness. His focus was on how the self develops within tradition and community. Gunn introduces something valuable, the idea of discovering shared ground with the foreigner or even the enemy. But is this opposed to Durkheim? Not necessarily. It could be seen as extending his ideas. To learn from otherness, you need some shared commitment to that process, a kind of solidarity Durkheim himself valued. Also, there are substantive points where agreement is needed, like Judith Shklar's point that cruelty is the worst thing. Torture, humiliation are universally unacceptable. This needs to be part of the conversation. And Durkheim did move beyond solidarity in Gunn's sense. He didn't fear conflict or pluralism. In fact, he argued that periods divided over morality are the most inventive morally. Moral growth often comes from challenging assumptions, precisely from encountering different viewpoints. Crisis, when basic assumptions are questioned, is when growth happens. Consider the Dreyfus affair again. In Durkheim's Europe, the Jew was often seen as the other. Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish French army officer, became a scapegoat for treason amidst fierce nationalism after France's defeat by Germany. Despite flimsy evidence, he was convicted. When Durkheim entered the fray, he saw it not just as a legal case, but as a chance for moral renewal. He hoped France could prove its commitment to the rights and dignity of all individuals, regardless of background. Many nationalists argued solidarity the nation was paramount, trumping the details of Dreyfus's case. But Durkheim insisted that true French solidarity, its moral identity, depended on upholding human rights and protecting diversity, even when it meant defending the accused other. Perhaps Gunn doesn't go beyond solidarity, but beneath it, to a fundamental human landscape where any real solidarity can grow. He finds remarkable examples of kinship discovered even in extreme alienation. Durkheim's focus was on what could flourish in democracies, guided by their ideals, not just reacting to grim histories. His hope was specific, that democracies could be great not by military might or wealth, but by their commitment to rights and justice. Ultimately, Durkheim's work remains incredibly relevant as we grapple with building solidarity in our complex, diverse, and interconnected world.